He slammed the door hard enough that the little bell above it kept ringing long after he had entered. A cold gust of rain swept in with him, trailing the smell of gasoline and wet leather. Every head in the diner turned for a moment, then looked away the way people do when trouble walks in and they pretend not to see it. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and covered in the kind of silence that fills a room even when no words are spoken. His boots were still dripping water when he dropped himself into the corner booth by the window. The neon sign outside flashed red over his face, carving hard lines across eyes that looked older than his years. From behind the counter, Mara wiped her hands on her apron and sighed. She had seen all types in her years here: lonely truckers, angry husbands, kids running away from home. But something about this man felt different. There was heaviness around him, a kind of invisible weight that pressed down on everything near him. Still, she put on the same warm smile she always did and walked over, holding a coffee pot that steamed like a small promise of comfort. "Evening," she said softly. "Would you like some coffee to start?" He did not look up, just grunted, black, as if the word itself was a burden. She poured it without another word. The liquid shimmered in the cup, dark and bitter, catching the reflection of the flickering lights. He wrapped both hands around it, not to drink, but like someone trying to remember what warmth felt like. That was the first time she noticed his hands. Scars, small ones, ran across his knuckles. A burn mark on one wrist. The kind of hands that told stories most people would rather forget. He ordered a burger, nothing fancy, no sides. When she returned with the plate, he was staring at his phone, the screen cracked, a photo of a young girl as his wallpaper. She could only see it for a second, but something about the image stayed in her mind. A girl smiling with ice cream dripping down her chin. The kind of smile that makes the world look innocent again. "Your food," Mara said gently. He did not even thank her, just muttered something about it taking too long. Her jaw tightened, but she forced a smile anyway. In this job, patience was not kindness, it was armor. You learned to swallow the sting, to smile through other people's storms. He ate like a man who did not taste anything. Between bites, he checked his phone again and again, sometimes locking it without reading whatever message had appeared. Mara pretended not to notice, but she did. She always noticed. He snapped his fingers once for ketchup, once for water, and once more just to get her attention. Every time she approached, he spoke less and frowned more. At one point he raised his voice, not enough to make a scene, but enough for the few late-night regulars to glance over. She felt her patience thinning. She had been on her feet for 9 hours. Her mother's hospital bills were waiting back home. Her car was making that noise again, and this man, this stranger, was draining the last bit of her strength. Still, she stayed kind. Because sometimes kindness is the only rebellion you have left. As she refilled his cup for the third time, she caught herself wondering who he really was. The leather jacket, the helmet placed beside him, the faint patch on his sleeve. Iron wolves. Maybe a club, maybe a memory. She could not tell. He looked like someone who had been too far down too many roads and forgotten where he meant to stop. When she came back to clear the plate, she found the burger barely touched. He was staring out the window, where the rain ran in long streaks against the glass. "You okay with the food?" she asked softly. He did not answer right away. Then, in a voice that sounded more tired than rude, he said, "It is fine." But it was not fine. Nothing about him looked fine. She hesitated. She wanted to say something more, but what? What could you possibly offer to someone who looked like they were built out of regret? Instead, she just nodded and stepped away. The clock ticked past midnight. The diner grew quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator. Outside, the world had turned to silver under the streetlights. The biker sat motionless for a long time, then finally stood up, pulling out a few crumpled bills from his wallet. He placed them under the saucer with his check. Then he paused, pulled a pen from his jacket, and scribbled something on the back of the paper. He stared at it for a long moment, as if he was arguing with himself, then folded it once and slid it beneath the coffee cup. Without a word, he put on his helmet, stepped out into the rain, and disappeared into the dark. Mara waited until the sound of his motorcycle faded down the highway before she walked to the booth. The smell of rain still lingered where he had been sitting. She cleared the plate, lifted the saucer, and froze. A folded note, damp at the edges, waited underneath. Her name was not on it. Just a single word on the outside. Sorry. Her pulse quickened. People left tips, not apologies. She unfolded it slowly, the paper trembling in her hands. The handwriting was rough, uneven, like someone not used to saying gentle things. "I was not angry at you," it began. "I was angry at myself." She read further, the words pulling her in deeper. "My daughter used to work nights in a place like this. Tonight would have been her birthday. I came here because I could not bear to be home. You reminded me of her. The way you smiled, even when I did not deserve it. I lost her in an accident 3 years ago. I was supposed to pick her up that night, but I was too tired, too drunk, too late. She never made it home. Every year I try to sit in her old booth somewhere, order her favorite meal, and fail to be decent. I failed again tonight, but you showed me kindness anyway. Thank you for treating me like a person when I could not act like one." Mara's hands trembled as she read. The last line hit hardest. "She used to call me her hero. You reminded me that maybe I still can be one, even for a minute." Mara pressed her lips together, feeling the sting behind her eyes. She folded the note back slowly, her throat tight, her chest aching. The diner was empty now, silent except for the rain. Outside, the neon sign flickered between red and blue, casting shifting colors over the paper in her hand. Imagine standing there, realizing that a small act of patience just helped a stranger carry a grief too heavy for words. You feel humbled, fragile, and strangely proud all at once. Mara set the note down, wiped her eyes with the corner of her sleeve, and whispered into the quiet, "You were a hero tonight." She looked out through the window, hoping to catch even a glimpse of his tail light down the road, but there was only darkness. Still, somehow, it did not feel empty anymore. The note haunted her through the night. Even after she locked up the diner and stepped out into the soft drizzle, she could still feel the weight of it in her apron pocket. The rain had slowed to a mist now, floating through the orange halo of the streetlights. The sound of her footsteps echoed on the wet pavement as she crossed the parking lot to her old Corolla. She sat inside with her hands still gripping the steering wheel, staring at the note lying beside her on the passenger seat. Each line replayed in her mind like a song that refused to fade. "You reminded me of her. I was supposed to pick her up. She used to call me her hero." Mara swallowed hard. Somewhere out there, a man was riding through the rain with tears in his helmet, carrying a guilt that had burned through 3 years of silence. She wondered if he had anyone left to talk to, if he even wanted to be found. The engine coughed before coming alive. As she pulled onto the empty road, she whispered to herself, "You never know whose life you're standing in the middle of." The next morning, the world moved as if nothing had happened. The diner filled again with voices, clattering dishes, and the smell of butter and coffee. The truckers joked. The young couple argued over toast. The radio played an old country song about broken promises. Mara smiled through it all, but part of her was elsewhere. Every time she wiped the table, every time she poured coffee, her eyes drifted to that booth by the window, the one the biker had chosen. That evening, after her shift, she unfolded the note again. The paper was already soft from her touch, like something precious and fragile. She thought about throwing it away, about convincing herself that it was just a small human moment, nothing more. But she could not. Some words are not meant to disappear. Later that week, as she was cleaning tables, a man in a tan jacket stepped inside. Not a biker, just an ordinary man, mid-50s maybe, with a kind but tired face. He smiled when he saw her. "You work here every night?" he asked. "Mostly," she said, trying to place his face. He nodded slowly, glancing toward the booth in the corner. "My brother stopped by a few days ago. Big guy, black bike, rough around the edges." Mara froze. Her hand tightened around the coffee pot. "Yes," she whispered. The man smiled faintly, sadness behind it. "He told me about you. Said you were the first person who'd spoken to him kindly in years." Mara blinked, unsure what to say. "He wanted me to bring you this," the man continued, pulling a small envelope from his jacket pocket. "He said you'd understand." She accepted it with trembling fingers. The man gave a polite nod, placed a few dollars on the counter for coffee, and left as quietly as he came. Mara opened the envelope after her shift, sitting once again in that same corner booth. Inside was a folded photograph. A young girl with long dark hair grinning at the camera, holding a balloon shaped like a heart. Behind her stood the same biker from that rainy night. No helmet this time, just a father's awkward smile trying to match his daughter's light. There was writing on the back. Her name was Lily. You reminded me of her kindness. I sold the bike. I am trying to start over. Thank you. Mara pressed the photograph to her chest and closed her eyes. The air inside the diner felt different, softer somehow. The same walls, the same lights, but now they held a story she would never forget. Days turned into weeks, but that one night refused to fade. It became a quiet rhythm in her thoughts, a reminder that the smallest gestures can reach the deepest wounds. When customers were rude or impatient, she looked at the picture hanging behind the counter, a young girl's smile next to the note framed in glass, and remembered that everyone has a reason. One afternoon, a storm rolled in again, rain hammering the roof like a familiar song. A teenage boy came in, soaked and shivering, asking for nothing more than a place to stay until it stopped. He had no money, no direction, just tired eyes. Without hesitation, Mara poured him a cup of coffee and pushed a slice of pie toward him. He blinked in surprise. I didn't order this. She smiled gently. I know. The boy hesitated, then smiled back, the kind of uncertain smile that belongs to someone who is not used to kindness. And for a second, Mara saw the same quiet miracle replaying all over again. The invisible line that connects strangers when one heart decides to care. That night, after everyone left, she turned off the lights and stood by the window. Outside, the road shimmered under the rain. Somewhere far away, maybe in another town, maybe on another quiet night, a man was living differently because of one small act inside this diner. Imagine that. How one tired waitress, who almost lost her patience, unknowingly became someone's redemption. Mara looked at the framed note again before locking the door. You never really know, she whispered, how much one good thing matters until the world tells you it does. And for the first time in a long while, she walked into the rain without hurrying. The quiet miracle did not end with a photograph and a thank you. It kept moving, like a current under the surface of everyday life, pulling unseen pieces together. Mara did not know this yet. She only felt the small strength it left behind, the way you feel a hand on your back even after it is gone. She kept working, kept smiling, kept framing the day in tiny acts of care. But the world had already started to bend towards something larger. The first bend came on a Tuesday morning when the owner taped a notice near the register. Rent had gone up. Winter was coming. Costs were climbing like ivy, and the old diner could not keep up. The words were practical and cold. The message beneath them was simple: cut hours or close early. Fewer shifts meant less pay. Less pay meant thinner groceries, tighter bills, and harder choices for Mara and everyone else who wore an apron here. She read the notice twice and felt her stomach drop. On her break, she set her lunch aside and pulled out a folded page from her pocket, the biker's note, and read a single line again. Thank you for treating me like a person on the day I felt least like one. It steadied her. She put the paper away, clocked back in, and poured coffee like it was courage. That afternoon, a man with a clipboard came in to measure the booths. He talked about modernization, about brand refresh, about a unified concept. He did not see the small photo framed behind the counter, or if he did not understand why it mattered. He spoke in numbers. People in numbers forget that a booth is not just a seat. It is a memory folded into vinyl. Imagine standing at the edge of something you love, watching a tape measure decide its fate. Imagine knowing you cannot stop the change and still refusing to stop caring. That was Mara's day, from open to close. That night, the weather turned. Wind pressed against the windows and lit up the neon in erratic flashes. A woman came in with a baby wrapped tight in a blanket, her hair wet, her eyes wide. She was not here for food. She was here because the bus shelter across the street had turned into a wind tunnel and the baby would not stop shaking. Without asking permission or checking policy, Mara led them to a booth, fetched a dry towel from the back, and warmed a cup of milk in the microwave. Rules matter until a life sits in front of you. Then values matter more. The woman began to cry from relief. The baby settled, small breaths turning even. When the wind died and the woman left, she pressed a crumpled thank you note into Mara's hand. No money, no address, just 2 sentences. You made a hard night softer. I will remember. Another night, a high school kid came in late, jaw clenched, eyes reddened from holding it in. He stared at the menu without reading, ordered the cheapest thing he could find, and poked at it with a fork like it had offended him. Mara brought extra fries without charging and placed a napkin under his water to stop the glass from wobbling. He whispered thank you, barely audible. Before leaving, he looked at the framed note and the little smiling girl and asked who she was. A reminder, Mara said. He nodded like a person who needed one. Small acts opened small doors. People who had never spoken began to share pieces of their quiet battles. A regular confessed he was 3 months sober and terrified of day 4. A nurse admitted that some nights she sat in her car and cried before driving home so her kids would not see. A delivery driver said he used to stop here with his brother after fishing trips, and now he stops alone and orders 2 coffees because some habits are the only way to keep a person present. The diner became a lighthouse for travelers in ordinary storms. Still, the notice on the wall did not disappear. Hours stayed cut. The owner looked grayer by the week. The future felt like a clock ticking too loudly. And then, as if by design, the past walked back in. It happened on a Sunday night near closing, when the sky outside was the color of slate and the radio mumbled low. The door opened. The bell rang its familiar, thin ring. A man stood there with a paper bag in one hand and uncertainty in the other. No helmet this time. No leather jacket. Just a denim shirt, washed too many times, and eyes that had learned how to meet the world again. It was him. Not the man who slammed doors and barked for coffee. Not exactly. He looked like the same story rewritten with better choices. He approached the counter, placed the paper bag on it carefully, and nodded toward the framed note. I wondered if you still had that. Mara's breath hitched, but her voice stayed steady. I did not plan to let it go. He looked around the room, at the booths, at the light, at the small photo. I sold the bike, he said. It felt like removing a thorn I had convinced myself belonged inside me. He paused. I have been going to meetings. I have been showing up for work. I called her mother and apologized without asking for forgiveness. I do not know how to measure progress and miracles, but I know I have fewer excuses and more mornings where I can look in the mirror. He slid the paper bag across the counter. I brought something. It is not payment. It is a thank you the size of what you gave me. Inside was a bound notebook and an envelope. The notebook had a title written in a careful hand, The Kindness Ledger. The envelope held receipts and names, and a short letter from a small community center 2 towns over. He had volunteered on weekends. He had started a scholarship in Lily's name for night shift workers studying for something better, nursing certificates, GED classes, trade licenses. The envelope contained the first deposit slip, modest but real, with a note. It began in a booth with a cup of black coffee and a patient waitress. Mara felt the air shift in her chest. She swallowed. You do not measure healing by its volume, but by its direction. His life was facing forward. He looked at the for-lease, noticed that now hung beside the register. Will this place still be here? We are trying, she said. It takes more than coffee to keep a lighthouse on. He nodded once, slow. Then, with a mixture of fear and courage, he asked, would you let me help? He had spoken those words to 2 people before, a sponsor at his meeting, who said help is a verb, and Lily, in a cemetery, where the wind stole half his sentences and returned them as resolve. Now he said them again, to the person who had given him a sentence strong enough to build a bridge. Thank you for treating me like a person. Imagine standing at the boundary between pride and purpose. Imagine knowing that money cannot buy back years, but it can anchor a present where kindness grows. The owner came out from the office. Numbers were discussed. Plans were sketched. In the space where despair had been, a scaffolding of hope began to rise. He did not try to become a hero. He showed up before opening to fix a leaky faucet. He painted the back hallway. He replaced a flickering light. He handed out flyers at the farmer's market with the steadiness of someone paying a debt to a world he had wronged and a daughter he still loved. Word spread. That place with the note. That diner that helped that guy turn his life around. That booth where the photo hangs. People started coming not out of curiosity, but out of recognition. They came because the story was not neat, it was honest. They brought coins in jars and bills and envelopes, and, more valuable, they brought their own stories, which turned the diner from a place that serves food to a place that feeds people. On a windy evening, a group of writers rolled in, older, quieter, gentler than the movies make them. They parked in a line like a row of commas in a sentence that was still being written. They ate, they listened, and then they left an envelope at the register with a simple note, for Lily's ledger. You are not riding alone. On a bright morning, a nurse posted a photo online of her early breakfast at the counter and wrote about the framed note and the way strangers can rewire each other's lives without even planning to. The post traveled fast because truth does. A local reporter came by, took a picture of the neon sign reflected in the window, and titled the article, "The Diner Where Apologies Become Actions." Through all of it, Mara kept doing what she had always done, pouring coffee as if it were grace, listening without fixing, and reminding herself that patience is not passive. It is a choice to believe that a person is still becoming. She watched the man return again and again, never asking for praise, always choosing the next right thing in a long line of right things. Then came the second bend, the one that did not look like hope when it arrived. A letter showed up addressed to the owner from the landlord's lawyer. A new offer had been made by a developer who wanted the corner lot. Numbers again, bigger this time. The kind you do not argue with unless you have a foundation stronger than a checkbook. The letter gave them 60 days. 60 days to prove that a place built on late-night coffee and second chances was worth more than new glass and clean angles. 60 days to gather a community, to convert a story into structure, to turn a kindness ledger into a lifeline. The man read the letter twice. Mara read it 3 times. The owner stared at it like a weather report predicting a storm they had outrun for years finally catching up. Then the man reached for the ledger. He set it on the counter, palm flat on its cover, as if steadying a heartbeat. "We will not let this place end in silence," he said. Not a threat, a vow. Imagine the countdown beginning. Imagine the whole town deciding whether stories are just something you tell or something you stand inside and keep alive. The next morning, a new note appeared under a saucer. Not from the man, from a stranger who had watched all of this quietly. 3 words, written in simple handwriting, "Keep the lights." The words "keep the lights" became a seed that rooted in everyone who read it. The note sat on the counter next to the register, plain as an invoice, but people paused at it like pilgrims before a candle. By the end of that day, someone had taped a small envelope beneath it with $20 inside. The next morning, a family of 4 from a nearby town drove in just to eat breakfast. They said they had read about the story online and wanted to see where kindness lives. Soon, the diner's walls began to fill with pinned notes, each written in different hands. For Lily's scholarship, for second chances, for the waitress who reminds us to be better. Every scrap of paper was a whisper in the same language, that goodness, when spoken aloud, multiplies. The man, once the rude biker, came in every day after work now. He fixed shelves, oiled hinges, replaced a broken heater that had rattled for years. He did not talk much about the past. He did not have to. Redemption, it turns out, is a word that sounds best in action. One evening, as dusk poured through the windows, he walked to the counter holding a small metal tin. "For the fundraiser," he said simply. Inside was every tip he had earned that week. "I thought about Lily. She would have wanted this place to stay." Mara looked at him, the same man who once slammed a cup down in anger. His eyes were softer now, but not empty. They carried purpose. She smiled. "You already helped more than you know." He shook his head gently. "No, you helped me remember what it means to try." The countdown on the lease continued. 30 days left, then 20, then 10. But hope has a way of breaking arithmetic. Donations came from truckers who had stopped there years ago, from strangers who mailed letters with small bills tucked inside, from old regulars who showed up just to order one more slice of pie. Even the mayor came by quietly one afternoon, bought coffee for everyone in the room, and left without fanfare, only saying, "Every town needs a story like this." On the final night before the lease expired, the diner was full to the edges. Laughter, music, rain against the glass, the smell of frying butter and fresh coffee. The man sat at his usual booth, helmet beside him, no longer a symbol of escape, but of arrival. He looked at the framed photo of Lily and whispered something only she could hear. At closing time, the owner stepped out of the back office holding a letter. His hands were trembling. "It's official," he said. The buyer withdrew. "We own the place outright, paid in full by donations, and the scholarship funds overflow." No one spoke for a moment. Then someone began to clap. Then another. The sound rose like a tide, filling the room that had once known only quiet sorrow. Mara covered her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks. The man lowered his head, overcome by the noise of joy he once thought he did not deserve. When the cheering faded, Mara walked to the counter, picked up the original note, the one written on that stormy night, and taped it back on the wall beside the newest one that said keep the lights. She looked around at the crowd and said softly, "They will stay on." The man met her eyes across the room. In that gaze lived everything that words could not carry. Regret turned to purpose. Pain turned to service. Guilt turned to grace. Outside, the rain stopped. The sky opened in 1,000 glittering fragments, the neon sign reflecting in puddles like a heartbeat. The diner kept its lights. The scholarship grew. And on the counter by the window, 2 notes fluttered side by side, one written in apology, the other in hope. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness is not just a gesture. It is a match struck in the dark that keeps burning long after the hands that lit it are gone. Imagine you are walking down that same highway one night, rain starting to fall again. You see the glow of that diner in the distance. You step inside for a cup of coffee, and the warmth hits you before the door even closes. You look around and realize, this is not just a place that serves food. This is where stories are mended. And if you listen closely, over the hum of conversation and clinking plates, you can almost hear it, the echo of a daughter's laughter, a father's quiet redemption, and a waitress's simple, steadfast grace.